Hello everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today we're exploring a side of the Washingtons that many Americans rarely hear about. Their children. Well, Martha's children. Most people know that George Washington never had biological children of his own, but what many don't realize is that he helped raise Martha Washington's children from her first marriage and later became deeply involved in the lives of several grandchildren. In many ways, Mount Vernon was filled with children, laughter, family struggles, illness, grief, and tragedy. Few Americans realize that the Washingtons comforted a dying teenage girl in their own home, worried constantly about their son, and later helped raise the future owner of Arlington House, the estate that would eventually become Arlington National Cemetery. Before marrying George, Martha Dandridge married wealthy Virginia planter Daniel Parke Custis in 1750. Together they had 4 children: Daniel Parke Custis Jr., Francis Parke Custis, John Parke Custis, known as Jacky, and Martha Parke Custis, known as Patsy. Sadly, only Jacky and Patsy survived early childhood. The deaths of young children were tragically common in colonial America, even among wealthy families. Husband Daniel Parke Custis died suddenly in 1757, leaving Martha as one of the wealthiest widows in Virginia at just 26 years old. She controlled nearly 18,000 acres of land and hundreds of enslaved workers, making her one of the richest women in colonial America. Interestingly, George Washington was not Martha's only suitor after Daniel's death. Several Virginia men pursued her before she accepted Washington's proposal. 2 years later, in 1759, Martha married George. When they married, Jacky was about 4 years old. Patsy was about 2 years old. George gained an immediate family. He stepped into the role of stepfather. And contrary to popular image of Washington as distant and formal, letters and family accounts suggest he took his new responsibilities very seriously from the beginning. George and Martha Washington never had children together. Historians have debated why for many years. Some believe George Washington may have become infertile after surviving illness like smallpox and tuberculosis earlier in life. Others believe complication from Martha's earlier pregnancies may have played a role. Whatever the reason, letters and diaries strongly suggest the Washingtons wished they could have had children together. Instead, the Washingtons devoted much of their time to raising the surviving children and later their grandchildren. The estate was often filled with nieces, nephews, tutors, visiting relatives, grandchildren, guests, and many family friends. Far livelier than many people imagine. The Washingtons also provided for their children books, toys, tutors, horseback lessons, clothing, and education. They constantly worried about their manners, discipline, schooling, and future marriages. Although George was not their biological father, he clearly viewed himself as responsible for guiding them into adulthood. Now, about the 2 surviving children. Let's begin with Patsy. Patsy was known as a gentle and affectionate child, and George cared deeply for her. But as she grew, she began suffering from severe epileptic seizures. In the 1700s, medicine had very little understanding of epilepsy. The Washingtons tried nearly everything available at the time: herbal remedies, dietary changes, mineral waters, nervous tonics, and even folk cures. Nothing worked. So, historians also believe Patsy may have suffered from intellectual or development disabilities in addition to epilepsy. Contemporary descriptions suggest she struggled socially and emotionally, and George and Martha became fiercely protective of her. During Patsy's seizures, George reportedly stayed calm and personally helped restrain and comfort her. Terrifying experiences for any family in the 18th century. Then tragedy struck. On June 19, 1773, Patsy died suddenly after a seizure at only 17 years old. George recorded the heartbreaking moment briefly in his diary, noting about 5 o'clock, poor Patsy Custis died suddenly. Friends later described the Washington household as devastated. Patsy died inside Mount Vernon only 2 years before the American Revolution erupted. Her death deeply affected the Washingtons emotionally and contributed to their more reserved personalities that many later observed. Despite her illness, Patsy had many interests: reading, needlework, and her strongest interest was in music, especially the harpsichord. After Patsy's passing, the Washington surviving child was John Parke Custis, known as Jacky. George worked hard to guide Jacky into adulthood, especially emphasizing education, responsibility, and discipline. But Jacky and Washington often clashed. Unlike Washington, Jacky had little interest in military discipline or serious academic study. Washington privately complained that Jacky preferred horse racing, entertainment, and social life over focused learning. Some sources indicate George may have tried to delay Jack's marriage because he believed he was too immature to manage adult responsibilities. Still, there is little doubt Washington loved him deeply. Jacky eventually married Eleanor Calvert Custis, and the couple had 4 children: Elizabeth Custis, also known as Eliza; Martha Custis, also known as Patty; Eleanor Custis, also known as Nellie; and George Washington Parke Custis, known as Wash. During the American Revolution, Jacky joined Washington during the Yorktown campaign in 1781. Historians believe several factors likely kept Jacky from military service early in the Revolution. George considered him better suited for plantation management than army command. Martha may have been protected because he was her only surviving child, and Jacky himself showed little enthusiasm for military life. He ultimately joined the Yorktown campaign only late in the war as a civilian aide to Washington, rather than as a combat officer. He spent time in crowded military camps where diseases spread rapidly. Diseases killed far more people during the Revolution than combat itself. Shortly after the American Revolution victory at Yorktown, Jacky became sick with what was then called camp fever, like typhus. He died in November 1781 at just 26 years old. The timing was heartbreaking. Washington experienced one of the greatest triumphs of his life, the victory at Yorktown, while simultaneously enduring one of his greatest personal tragedies. For the second time, George and Martha Washington lost a child. Now, about the grandchildren. After Jacky's death, George and Martha helped raise two of his youngest children at Mount Vernon, Eleanor Custis Nellie and George Washington Park Custis, often called Wash. The two older sisters remained primarily with their mother and her new husband. Washington became especially close to Nellie and Wash. That tells us a great deal about how he viewed his role in their lives. Every morning at Mount Vernon followed a carefully organized routine directed by George himself. Washington personally reviewed handwriting exercises and school reports. Nellie later described Washington as formal in public, but warm and affectionate within the family circle. She remembered him dancing with grandchildren at parties and participating in family games at Mount Vernon. Scenes very different from the stern marble image many Americans may imagine today. Nellie later became one of the most admired young women in early American society and frequently accompanied her grandmother, Martha Washington, during the presidential years in New York and Philadelphia. Meanwhile, Wash Custis developed an intense fascination with preserving George Washington's memory. Long before historic preservations became common, Wash collected artifacts, personal stories, furniture, letters, and family memories. George Washington Park Custis later built Arlington House overlooking the Potomac River in Virginia. He intended the mansion to serve partly as a memorial to George. Wash Custis' daughter, Mary Anna Custis Lee, later married Robert E. Lee. That connection linked the Washington family line to one of the most famous figures of the Civil War. Then history took an extraordinary turn. When Robert E. Lee joined the Confederacy during the Civil War, the Union government seized Arlington House and the surrounding estate. The property eventually became Arlington National Cemetery. So, through Martha Washington's descendants, the Washington family became permanently connected to America's most sacred military cemetery. It is one of the most remarkable and unexpected legacies connected to the Washington family story. Family life mattered deeply to the Washingtons. They had concerns, disappointment, affection, grief, and responsibility, the same emotions many families experience today. Mount Vernon was not simply the home of a president, it was also the home of a family. Before we go, here's a little known fact about Washington's family life. George sometimes signed letters to his grandchildren as "Your Papa." If you enjoyed this deeper look into the children and grandchildren of the Washingtons, be sure to like, subscribe, and join us again as we continue exploring the fascinating human stories behind America's founding generation. Until next time, I bid thee a fair and most pleasant day.